Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, a special bonus episode. This is episode number 18, where I'm going to rank my top 80s and 90s kids movies. So let's go. Thanks for joining me, guys. Been having a lot of fun with the podcast. As if you haven't seen the regular podcast, I pick a random month and year from the 90s, and I spend anywhere between an hour and a half. Sometimes I go a little long. Talking about just memories I have from that time period, and talking about like the world of pop culture, sports, music, TV, just pretty much anything, trying to cover that particular month and year. But on the bonus episodes is where I can talk about pretty much any topic I want and any time period I want. And sometimes depending on the month, October is definitely horror themed or Halloween themed. In fact, coming up later this year in October, it's gonna be my top horror franchises. But like I said, I can pretty much talk about anything. Sorry there hasn't been a lot of content on the channel lately. I mean, there's video series I need to get back to doing, like my music reactions, Tales from the Albums, where I talk about a specific album that really touched me. Speaking of that, not a cheap plug, but kind of a segue. I did release my first album of music called Windows Down, Nowhere Bound. One of my favorite songs on there. My favorite song on there is probably Heartbreak County Prison. What it is this is basically my way of putting out my own music that I want to hear and trying to make it sound like it came out in the 90s. That was my goal, because you don't hear that kind of music on the radio anymore. So that was what I set out to do, and I've got like 25 songs that I've written since this album came out just a couple weeks ago that I'm like, I haven't even recorded yet, but just, it's been like super, my mind's been turning and writing music like I never have before. It's a really cool thing. If you'd actually like a copy of the album, like a physical CD copy, I can send it to you. It's only, I take PayPal. It's only $5 plus shipping, but I'll just charge the basic shipping, not anything like fancy or upcharge anybody. Or you could just get PayPal me thing from the Turtles movie. That kind of gives a hint on what's on this list. But now, if you want to get the digital copy, where I just send you a link either through email, Facebook, or whatever means you got me to send it, just $5, you can get the digital version. The digital version comes with the CD version too. I'll throw that in. Or if you don't, you don't have to spend any money to support me. Just find my links on my Facebook and everything, and it's on streaming everywhere. So if you use any of the streaming services, that just save it on there, add it to a playlist, share it, play it, whatever. Everything supports me. You don't have to spend a dime. I'm just sorry for all the cheap plugs. But I do want to get into this week's episode. Man, kids' movies in the 80s and 90s are something else. Of course, me being nostalgic for that time period, I don't really have too many fond memories of kids' movies from the 80s and or from the 2000s and on, because one, I stopped being a kid. So those movies don't hit you exactly the same. Not that they're not enjoyable, and adults can enjoy, movies made for kids, I'm not saying, oh, you're grown up, you're not allowed to watch that anymore. You be a kid at heart all you want. It's just, the movies never hit me the same. And I didn't want to just rank everything, I wanted to have kind of 3 different categories. I thought I'd have more, but there was some that really kind of fit into almost like a catch-all category. So I broke it down into 3 categories and different numbers on the list. Like sports movies, those were big in the 80s and 90s. Kids sports movies. I'll do that first. By the way, at the end, I'm gonna rank my top 5 of overall of all these. I didn't want to do a whole list of where I ranked them all, because some, it's hard to tell what's over others. But anyway, we're going to start with the top 10 sports movies. And again, this is from the 80s and 90s. It can be Disney, any studio really. And the only really caveat I put on this is and it has nothing to do with sports, it's just the whole list in general. Everybody has those movies you watch as a kid that you really, you might think, oh, that's my childhood there, but it's not specifically made for kids. like my favorite movie of all time, and probably the movie I watched the most as a kid that I probably shouldn't have been watching was Coming to America. But obviously I can't put that on this list. This is a list that if a kid watched this and wanted to see what it was like in the 80s and 90s, if they hadn't seen any of the older movies, they can go through this and, watch this stuff, But, and movies like Ace Ventura kind of skirt that, and The Mask, two Jim Carrey movies, kind of skirt that line. But I feel that Ace Ventura and The Mask were made more for adults, even though obviously they appeal to the kids. Some of the jokes in the Ace Ventura were definitely adult, oriented jokes. So stuff like that won't make this list. It'll be for future lists and stuff. Maybe top 90s comedies or something. I can make all kinds of these lists. But like I said, that's the only really caveat, is that it has to be specifically geared towards kids or families, So anyway, we're going to start, and I'm not going to spend forever. I didn't do a ton of research on this like I do on my podcast, where I'll look up, what the sports standings were, or for music, I'll look what the number ones were for that month, and that type of stuff. I just really looked up the year of the movie as basically the only info I put down, and, I'm going to talk about it. Some I might talk at length about, some just a couple seconds, Sorry, I'm taking forever even starting this podcast. But anyway, top 10 sports movies. Obviously, we're going to go from 10 to 1. Number 10 and actually number 9 are both movies that were staples, especially number 9 on here, staples of 90s kids movies, but I'd never actually seen until literally this year, and then the other one I seen last year, or maybe beginning of this year. Just for some reason, I never watched them. But anyway, number 10, 1995, The Big Green. This is one I'd seen maybe a month and a half ago. Just one that I'd never really watched. And it's a kid's soccer movie. It's about this woman that comes over from England, and she's like, you hear the exchange student? Well, she's like the exchange teacher or something. But, she moves to this small Texas town where there's almost nobody, nothing to do. This town has no money. And, being from England, football there to her is soccer. So she teaches these kids soccer, and the local sheriff is this doofus Barney Fife type person, but he's obsessed with this British woman, of course, because, of course, new woman in town, and there's nobody, like I said, nobody in this town. But it's a typical 90s type kids movie, where the team is obviously they never even heard of soccer before, so they're horrible, but they end up becoming good, and they face one of the big soccer teams around. Really good movie. Like I said, one of those ones that is a staple in the 90s I just never seen. And that leads me into number 9, which was 1993, The Sandlot. And I know that's one of the big ones. You never watched The Sandlot? I never watched E.T. till last year, people. You know me, my number one horror movie of all time is called The Horror Show. Not the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but The Horror Show, a little-known movie from 1989 about an electric chair that most people never heard of. I put out I think that was my first bonus episode, my top horror movies of all time, and people were probably seeing that and was like, what the heck is that even? I never even heard of that movie. How's it number 1 over all the great movies? But a lot of times my favorites come on just my feelings. But like I said, and sometimes I've never even seen things like E.T., like I was talking about. But The Sandlot, another one of those that, I probably should have seen back then, but I didn't. Of course, it's, they hit the ball over the fence, the signed baseball. They hit it over the fence, and they got to get it, and there's this dog over there. But really, it's just a ragtag group of kids playing baseball, in The Sandlot. And like I said, I see this either the end of last year or the beginning of this year. I don't remember. I know it's a crime. 90s kid, all obsessed about the 90s and never seen The Sandlot. But I've seen it now, and I definitely enjoy it. Maybe if I'd have seen it more back then, it would have been higher on the list. But, I only seen it once. And a lot of these other movies up there, I've seen a ton of times. I have a lot of fond memories of. So we're going to move into number 8. And it is D3, The Mighty Ducks from 1996. I loved all the Mighty Ducks movies. Obviously, this is the third one. This is where they go into this prep academy and join the team there. And Emilio Estevez, who played Coach Bombay, isn't really throughout the movie a ton. You see him at the beginning and like near the end. But it's all about the kids joining this school, and obviously they're joining a school team that's a lot of them don't have respect for them. They're like, oh, who cares about the Mighty Ducks? You're in this now, blah blah blah, and that type of stuff. As the Mighty Ducks went on, it was still a good movie, but obviously I'm giving too much away. The Mighty Ducks the original one is higher on the list than the other two, but that's how it is sometimes with movies. Sometimes the sequels are better, and I'm not saying the sequel is bad in this case. It's just if I'm ranking something's got to fall under something else. But still, overall, Ducks series of movies were great. Coming in at number 7 was 1996 Space Jam. Now, if you watch the podcast, I'm not a big basketball fan, but I love Michael Jordan. It was kind of weird saying, like, how are you not a fan of this? But I mean, everybody knows Michael Jordan. And this movie here, specifically, like, if you didn't know Michael Jordan before, you knew him then. But, the Space Jam is Looney Tunes playing basketball, and they're going against, like, all these monsters, and they end up getting Michael Jordan to join their team. Not a cartoon version of Michael Jordan, actual Michael Jordan. If you're living on a rock and never seen it. Then again, I never seen The Sandlot before, recently, so maybe there's someone that hasn't seen Space Jam. I know there was a recent one with, I think, LeBron James, and it didn't even care to watch that. But yeah, the original Space Jam and the music in it, and it's just like, it encapsulated like that mid-90s time period where basketball was like huge because, baseball is America's pastime, but at this time, a lot of people were turned off of baseball. And you had in 94 at the end of the season, you didn't even get an end of the season for baseball because they went on strike, and then a shortened 95 season, it wasn't until like 98 when McGwire and Sosa with the home run race that baseball really got popular again. And then football has always been popular, but I think during this brief period of time when basketball, was right there with them, if not over them, you couldn't get away from basketball even if you didn't watch it. You were getting all kinds of news based on, with, Michael Jordan. You knew who the Bulls were, definitely. Dennis Rodman was always getting in trouble, and of course, joining the NWO in wrestling, because I'm a huge wrestling fan, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end when I talk about next month's bonus episode. But yeah, sorry if I'm spending too much time on each one of these, but yeah, Space Jam and basketball really encapsulated this time period. Coming in at number 6 is D2, The Mighty Ducks. This is from 1994, and this is obviously the sequel, and where the kids join Team USA, which is not the Olympic team, but like, a kid's version of that almost. And, they have to fit in with the other kids and, face bigger competition than they did just, in their city in the original Mighty Ducks. Still a really good movie. Number 5 is 1994's Little Giants, our first football movie on the list. I love this movie. It's got Rick Moranis. Sorry if I can't say his name right. Rick Moranis and Ed O'Neill, who's of course synonymous with Married with Children. You'd think Ed O'Neill in a kids movie in the 90s, like, oh no, is it going to be Al Bundy? But no, he's a good enough actor where, you see it's Al Bundy, but, when he starts acting, it's like, okay, it's not Al Bundy. He's a different person. He wasn't talking about his 4 touchdowns. But anyway, they're brothers, and, Ed O'Neill is the more successful one. He's got this car dealership and always holds everything over his brother, and they're, Rick Moranis' character has a daughter that wants to play football, and she can't join Ed O'Neill's team because, God forbid, a girl join the football team, especially back then. So Rick Moranis' character, and I can't remember their freaking names. It's been forever since I've seen it, but he ends up starting a team to face them, and they're the Giants, because a lot of sports teams, especially like Little League Baseball, will take, Major League Baseball team names. And, so they were the Giants. And obviously Ed O'Neill's team was the Cowboys, because you're talking 1994, Cowboys were one of the teams in the NFL that everybody knew, whether you watched football or not. Just like with basketball, you knew the Bulls. in football, you knew the 49ers and the Giants. But yeah, another one of those underdog team stories. A lot of those are just like that in the kids' movies, the sports movies. But it really does show a good message. Probably had a lot of people, I guarantee a lot of people trying out for sports they never thought they would. Just, just seeing the success that all these kids had that, a lot of them look like they'd never been on the field before, especially in this movie. But we'll move to number 4 now, 1992, the original Mighty Ducks. And this one's an all-time classic. I got to talk about Emilio Estevez, Coach Bombay. He was just like going to join the Olympics or the NHL or something, but he got injured. And he becomes like a lawyer. But then I can't remember if it was DUI or he did something where he was going to be in trouble, and his community service was coaching like this ragtag team, and they were, didn't know what they were doing, and he didn't want to do it, but by the end, he ended up loving all the kids, and, they were a big success, and, and, I mean, the Mighty Ducks are so big that obviously they made an NHL team, the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, and not only that, but they had another Mighty Ducks, the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, which I've been to a few of their games at the old Cincinnati Gardens before they sadly tore those down. But I can't remember what league it was. It wasn't the NHL. It was one of the smaller leagues. We had 2 teams in Cincinnati. We had the Cincinnati Cyclones. They were always the higher ones, and then the Mighty Ducks. But that's the only time I'd ever been to a hockey game is to see either the Mighty Ducks or the Cyclones. Some of the sports like that, like that and basketball. Like, I don't watch on TV, but I wouldn't mind, I don't mind going to the games. It's a fun atmosphere and fun to watch the stuff in person. But I wouldn't necessarily, I'd never sit around watching hockey. But the Mighty Ducks had everybody loving hockey back then. But now we're moving into our top 3. At number 3 is 1991's Little Big League. I love this movie. It's about the Minnesota Twins is the team in it. Because, some of these movies had actual, big league teams, as you'll see with the next 3 on my list, actually. It's about a kid that his grandpa owned the Minnesota Twins. Pizza. There's pizza again. But his grandpa owned the Minnesota Twins, and he died and actually left the team to his grandson. But instead of him, finding somebody that could actually run the team, he decided to run the team. So you can imagine all the hijinks that took place there with the, I can't remember how old the kid was, like 12 or something, 13, running a baseball team. I haven't seen this movie in forever. In fact, that and Little Giants I haven't seen in forever, and I actually got them on DVD on the same disc. I need to watch them. But yeah, it was one of my favorite movies of all time. He said just him trying to run the league and, the players not wanting to respect, I'm not going to take, direction from a kid. Of course, they ended up doing that. Number 2 is another all-time classic, 1994's Angels in the Outfield. I know this was a Disney movie, I think, back in the 60s. If I'm wrong about the decade, don't shoot me. But the one that's stood the test of time is definitely been more popular is the 1994 version. It had Danny Glover in it, Christopher Lloyd. But it's about a kid that's at a foster home, and his dad's a piece of crap. I think his mom died, but and his dad didn't want him or was on drugs or something, couldn't take care of him. But anyway, he comes back and tells his kid basically goodbye at the foster home. He's like, after he'd been there for a while, he's like, and the kid's like, "Are we ever going to be a family again?" Because he's he wants his dad. You can't blame him there. And he's like, "Yeah, when the Angels win the World Series," or was it the pennant? I can't remember. But and the Angels were like the horrible team at the time. I don't remember if they were like in real life that bad. They might have been. I don't remember. Obviously, this was a movie, but the California Angels, which are now the Anaheim Angels. But anyway, and the Angels. Their baseball stadium was like right near their house or the foster home. They would actually like sneak up in a tree and watch it until the security guard caught him. But anyway, he goes to sleep at night and prays, because he believes his dad, when the Angels win, then then we'll be a family again. But anyway, actual angels come to him in the form of Christopher Lloyd, who's known as Al, and he wears the American League. He steals the umpire's hat, the AL from American League. He calls himself Al, and the angels start like lifting up the players like to catch the ball, or like helping them hit a home run. It like shatters the ball in the bat, and just all kinds of stuff. And only the kid can see the angels. And his little buddy, who ends up becoming his brother. This little kid that was there at the foster home with him, he's always saying, for the impossible, it could happen. That's like the one thing you remember from that movie is the kid going, it could happen. But anyway, he ends up realizing that, and the other thing is like Danny Glover is the manager of the team, and he's like this hothead and always mad at everything. His players suck. But the kid comes and he starts telling him there's really angels there, and he's like, well, of course, but they start winning, so he looks at him as his good luck charm, so he's there at every game. And eventually he starts to believe him. And even at the end, once the kid realizes his dad's not coming back, he gave up his custody, and the kid's like, all this for nothing. But at the end, Danny Glover actually ends up adopting him and the little "it can happen" kid. So like it's a great message, a great sports movie, and just a great mix of comedy and heart, I guess you'd call it. Just a great message in a Disney movie. It's great. I thought whether to put that number one or the next one number one, but I eventually went with this one. My number one sports movie from the 80s and 90s, which, by the way, looking at this list, they're all from the 90s. I don't know if there's a reason, or just that's the only sports movies I knew was back in the 90s. But anyway, 1993 Rookie of the Year. This one is so classic. It's about the kid, Henry Rowan Gardner, and they kept messing. I only remember his last name because they kept the manager kept messing his name up like over and over again. But anyway, it's this kid that plays baseball, and he's horrible. And one day he's like outside, he slips and falls and like breaks his arm. And when they put the cast on him and everything, and they take it off, and there's like some kind of cartilage or joint or something in his arm that makes it like you can like audibly hear it almost like a rubber band or something. Anyway, he can throw a ball like over 100 miles an hour. So and he discovers that because he actually hits the doctor. One of the kids is like funky butt love. Like it has like. That's one of there's many memorable lines from this movie. But anyway, he's sitting in the crowd at the Cubs game, because that's the team in this one. And the Cubs, of course, another team that sucks. And as a Reds fan, we're in the same division. I was like, good, the Cubs do suck. But anyway, someone hits they hit a home run, and he ends up throwing it back, and he threw it all the way from the outfield to like the catcher, and people are like, what the heck? And the manager's like, give me that kid. I can't remember if it was the owner or the manager, but anyway, he ends up somehow becoming a pitcher for the Cubs. They try to work on his control and everything, and of course near the end of the movie, they're getting ready for like the championship, and he ends up falling and messing his arm up again, where it didn't break it, but it like basically goes back to normal. So now he can't even throw right. So he's like in the last bit of the game, and he like throws the ball like up in the air like underhanded and somehow gets the guy out. Such a great the all-time one is that when he's on running bases, because back then the National League the pitchers actually hit, so he had to hit sometimes, and mostly he would just get walks because he's so small, so his strike zone's smaller and the pitchers weren't used to it. So anyway, he's like in between first and second going, pitcher's got a big butt. That's such a classic line from that. But yeah, that's my top 10 sports movies. We're going to move on now and go to the next category is animated. I originally was going to do like a Disney list, but I realized I just wanted to put an animated list together, and it's the top 10 of them. And there are some 80s in this, not just 90s. But we're going to start with number 10, Disney's 1996 movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I remember watching this so much as a kid. We had this as You remember those Disney tapes from the 80s and 90s, and even the 2000s, I think, when they still, back till they stopped having tapes. Those old boxes that opened to the white plastic, like heavy duty looking cases, like Disney. It was an experience. But anyway, this is a classic story. Not Disney didn't come up with it, about I can't speak. Quasimodo, the hunchback that lives in the tower in Notre Dame. And I haven't seen this probably since the 90s, so I don't remember all the details of it. But I just remember watching this so much, and and the princess, I think she was a princess, Esmeralda. She wasn't a princess, she was just someone, she fell in love with him. It was the basic message, he's all, his face is deformed, he's a hunchback, but basically showing kids, none of that matters. It matters what's inside. It's a great message. A lot of these kids' movies had similar themes. Number 9, I went with 1988's, the first 80s movie on the list, The Land Before Time, the first one. There's been 14 movies of The Land Before Time. It almost became a joke. It's like, oh, The Land Before Time, part 95. But the original one is definitely the best. I don't remember how many of these I've seen. I've probably seen 3 or 4 of them. I don't even know if I've seen 2, 3, and 4, or if it's just other ones. But the like I said, the first one's the best. Littlefoot's mother dies. One of those instances of kids' movies where it shows death, and it's obviously sad, but it teaches a lesson. But anyway, his mother dies trying to protect him, and he has to get back to the Great Valley to be reunited with other dinosaurs like him, because his mother was killed by like a carnivore dinosaur. I think it might have been a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It might have been something else. I can't remember. But I remember this movie being responsible for like dinosaurs becoming a popular thing. Like, there was like, they'd give out these sets of not give out, but they'd sell these sets of dinosaurs. You'd get all the different types of dinosaurs, from the Brontosaurus, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Raptor, all those, Triceratops, and there'd be like, grass and stuff, and you like set up a whole like dinosaur village type thing. But, this was pretty much the start of all that, and then of course you had the Dinosaurs ABC TV show, and then probably the height of dinosaur madness in the 90s was Jurassic Park movies, 1 and 2 specifically. But yeah, this was pretty much what started people like on the dinosaur kick, if you want to call it that. Coming in at number 8 was 1987's The Garbage Pail Kids movie. And I wrote in parentheses, yes, I know it's not animated, but in my head it is, so it stays. Because when I was doing this, I could have swore, because I hadn't seen this since the 80s, since I was a little kid. But it's so memorable that I could have swore it was animated, but it wasn't. At least I don't know if it was, parts of it was computer animated or not, but everything I looked up, it was showing it wasn't animated. But I'm leaving it on the list anyway, because without it, I'd have a top 9. And anyway, it seems like it should be animated. But anyway, The Garbage Pail Kids, if you don't know what that is, basically was a parody ripoff of the Cabbage Patch Kids. It was a set of cards that came out in the 80s, and I remember having a bunch of these. I still got some. Not the ones from back then, but ones I've gotten over time. Pizza. Shut up, baby turtle. You're coming soon. But it was a set of cards, and the Cabbage Patch Kids are all these cute little babies. These were these little foul, stinky little babies that there was ones that farted and ones that had stuff all over them and dirt and like I don't remember too many details about the movie, but I remember it just being insane. I remember like one of my earliest memories as a kid is my parents renting this for me. It was back when my parents were still together, and us watching this. It was crazy. Coming in at number 7 is 1998's The Lion King 2: Simba's Pride, and obviously the sequel to The Lion King. In this one, Simba's daughter befriends the oldest son of Scar, and you know how at the end of The Lion King, which obviously there's no spoiler, it's coming up later. Scar took over after killing Mufasa, and then Simba came back and took over the Pride. Well, in this one, Simba and Nala had a daughter, and she's going to be the next queen. But they run into Scar's oldest son, and obviously the two hated sides of the family, but they're just like basically just like kids. They don't know anything about oh, I hate you, I'm supposed to and it's you see them grow up and grow apart because of the differences of where they live, and because Scar's family was outcast after the crap he pulled in the first one. But it has a really good message to it. Speaking of sequels to popular Disney's movies, number 6 was 1994's The Return of Jafar, or Aladdin 2 as I call it. But it's officially listed as just The Return of Jafar. In this one, Jafar actually becomes a genie. This is a crazy movie. Man, just those Disney movies of the 90s are just the best. And like I said, I'm not going to have this above the original because the original was so much better. But it was definitely a good one. And then, of course, you got the Aladdin cartoon series, which I believe took place right before Return of Jafar, like in the timeline, I believe. But coming at number 5 is 1995's Toy Story. Of course, the original. To start off, they're coming out with a new one this year. This is just a classic Disney, and it was the first Disney Pixar movie about the toys that are alive, and all the the lives and adventures they have until a human's around, and then they have to freeze in place. But it all, of course, it had people wondering, like, is this real? Do these toys really have a life when I'm not around? But you got the internal struggle of Woody being Andy's favorite toy, but then oh, I want the Buzz Lightyear, the new toy that the kids, like any generation, the new thing comes out. Oh, I want this. And Woody's just an old cowboy, pull string toy, that says things. Buzz Lightyear's, got all these rockets and talks and, can do this and that. And, so there was, that battle. Plus, for the longest time, Buzz really thought he was Buzz Lightyear, in a space adventure, not just a toy. But nothing beats the original for this one. I like the other ones, but obviously my favorite of all time is the Toy Story original movie. Coming in at number 4 is 1992's Aladdin. We just talked about this basically. And another one of those. Disney was famous for taking older stories like, Aladdin, and Disneyifying it basically to where people almost think that Disney came up with Aladdin. No, Disney didn't come up with Aladdin. It was, definitely not an original story. I believe The Lion King was, but Aladdin definitely wasn't. Just like The Little Mermaid and Cinderella and Snow White. Those were all tales that have been around forever. But like with Aladdin, they made it their own, basically, And Robin Williams as the genie, nothing can touch that. I didn't even watch that live-action remake with Will Smith as a genie. What's he going to do, get mad if somebody talks about his wife? Anyway, yeah, this movie, classic, about the, Aladdin, the street kid that gets the magic lamp, and the genie Robin Williams comes out and goes crazy as he always does, but he wants the Princess Jasmine, and then turns out he didn't need the lamp all this time. She fell in love with him for who he was, but she was mad at him for lying because he used the lamp to make her think he was this big prince from like another town, and Jafar, the like wizard for the Sultan, was always up to no good, and freaking Gilbert Gottfried is the voice of Iago. He was so good at that. But anyway, coming in at number 3 was 1994's The Lion King. Obviously the original of The Lion Kings. I watched the live action remake of that. It was just pointless. The music sucked. There was really no need to remake it. It was perfect the way it is. And I hear they're making a Lion King 2 live action movie coming soon. It's just like, stop. Come on, Disney. If you ain't got nothing new, just focus on your stupid streaming service that you're so proud of and quit making movies. Anyway, this is a classic one about, Mufasa and his son Simba, one day you're going to be king, and then Mufasa's brother Scar wants to be king and uses the hyenas, and they end up killing Mufasa and taking over, and basically he tells Simba to leave because he was the reason his dad was killed, and he believed him, so he took off, and he befriends Timon and Pumbaa, and they're crazy characters, and they ended up getting their own movie and series. But yeah, and then he ends up coming back, when he realizes what's happened with Scar, and basically takes his kingdom back. Such a great cartoon, great movie, whatever you want to call it. Number 2 is 1981's The Fox and the Hound. Man, there's just something about this movie I love. It has so much heart to it. We got Copper, the little dog, and Todd, the fox, and they're not supposed to be friends because, hound dogs hunt fox. Well, Copper was like this new dog there with his, the older dog. I can't remember his name now. Oh, that's going to drive me crazy. I'll think of that all day and try to remember the other dog's name. But anyway, they live with this mean old man as a hunter, and, Todd, the fox, ends up moving with the nice old grandma that lives close to them, and Todd and Copper become friends, and there's like the owl and like the worm that become their little side friends, and and they're like, oh, you're not going to be able to be friends whenever you're older because this one hunts this, and they're like, oh, we'll always be friends, right? And then it ends up turning out that that's not true, that the old dog tries to chase off Todd one day, and the old dog gets hurt, and it makes Copper mad, because it's I don't know if the old dog is his. I don't think they're related, but he looks at him as like his father figure, so he's mad that he gets hurt. So then he starts instinct and everything taking over. He starts chasing him, but even before that, like because of the dog getting hurt because of the fox, and the old hunter knows that the fox lives there with the old grandma. Like, I'm gonna get him, and so the old grandma wants to protect Todd. So one of the saddest things ever in any movie. The old grandma takes Todd and leaves him out in the forest, and then goes away, and she's got a tear in her eye, and he's standing there. He's like, "What?" Like, I'm getting sad thinking about it now. Like, if you've never seen this movie, watch that, especially that scene. But by the end, Todd and Copper end up becoming friends again. And even the old dog's like, okay, whatever. And the funniest thing is the old man like has to get, I can't remember if he shot his own foot or just got injured or something, but the old grandma has to take care of him. It's kind of implied that they're going to get together almost. But even though they're all, shut up, woman, and that type of thing. But it has a happy ending. But that scene in the middle where she leaves him in the woods to try to protect him, that is one of the saddest things. Everybody talking about Old Yeller or Bambi's mom dying or something. To me, nothing sadder than that scene in The Fox and the Hound. But and I was struggling with whether that was the number one or not, but eventually landed on one that we watched a ton as kids. Number one is 1997's Hercules. I freaking love this movie so much. We watched it so much as a kid because we owned it, on tape, so we would watch it over and over and over again. But the classic, Greek mythology, where Hercules is the baby boy born to Zeus. ESPN wants something, I don't care. But yeah, and then it's the fates arrive and tell Hades, which is basically the devil, pretty much, or whatever in their mythology crap. Sorry if there's any people that actually believe the Greek things are real, and I don't know if that's an actual religion or just myths or whatever. So if I'm offending somebody, I'm not meaning to. But anyway, Hades knows that Hercules is gonna mess with his plans to take over everything, where Hades is gonna rule everything. So they ended up trying to kill Hercules, but he didn't get enough of the poison that his two little idiots he sent to give him. So what it does is just makes him mortal. There's the dumb siren. Dumb siren goes off every day at noon. Anyway, back to talking about Hercules. Yeah, he becomes mortal and ends up learning that Zeus is his actual father. Finds out he's adopted, and he has to become a hero. To a true hero. We know, Turtles. We're getting to you. He has become a true hero to be able to get back to Mount Olympus, and he meets Meg and falls in love with her, but she's basically like a slave to Hades, and then we Phil the trainer. Like, there's so many classic things from this movie. And the freaking song at the end is amazing by Michael Bolton, Go the Distance. Me and my brothers had our own version of this. I'll probably tell on a different one. This is supposed to be about kids, so I won't say some of the words we were making up for this song. But anyway, it was one of our favorite songs. Probably our favorite song from any 90s movie. Like, we would, get to the end and the credits. We'd watch the whole credits to listen to the music. And then we would rewind it 10 times and listen to the song again. But yeah, Hercules, definitely my top favorite animated movie from the 80s and 90s. And our final list is actually a top 30, and I'll try to get through these quickly. And it's like a catch-all. It's action, adventure, horror in there. Kids horror, obviously. Comedy. It's because it's kind of hard. Like, some of them, like the Turtles. You would classify that as an action-adventure movie, but also as a comedy. So, and you don't want to put stuff in two different, on the list twice or something. So, they must have heard their name, Turtles. But anyway, this is my top 30 of the action-adventure horror comedy mega category. We'll start with number 30, 1998's Dr. Dolittle. This was obviously a classic one, another remake of Disney's. I don't remember if this is Disney or not. This might not have been Disney. I can't remember. Anyway, I don't want to say for sure whether it was or not. But it starred Eddie Murphy. He was a vet and ended up being able to talk to animals. And there were several sequels to this, which I didn't really care for. But, I wouldn't say the original. This isn't the original. But the original one from the 90s with Eddie Murphy was the best. Number 29, 1993's Mr. Nanny. The first of two Hulk Hogan movies on this list. The Three Ninjas, the fourth one with Hogan, and it didn't make my list because that movie's crap. But anyway, Mr. Nanny is about Hogan as a former professional wrestler. And boy, he stretched in this actor's role. But also his manager, Sherman Hemsley, who always most famously played George Jefferson. But anyway, he goes work as like this bodyguard / babysitter for these kids that are always messing with their dad's always working on this chip at his work. It was this chip that's supposed to bring world peace or something. But anyway, they're always getting rid of every nanny and babysitter and everything because they run them off basically. But he obviously Hogan's character stays around longer, and it turns out somebody he had trouble with in the past in wrestling is actually evil whatever is trying to steal the chip for evil, so he ends up encountering him. It's cheesy, but it's still brings back good memories. Number 28 is 1993's Addams Family Values, the sequel for the Addams Family movies back then. In this one, the Addams family welcomes a new baby, which Wednesday and Pugsley are not happy about, and try to kill the baby various times during the movie. Insane to think that there's a movie where they're trying to kill babies and it's made for kids. But that was the 90s. Number 27 is 1994's Ernest Goes to School. First of many Ernest movies on my list. This is a crazy one. It's an Ernest movie. When is it not crazy? But anyway, he works as a janitor at the school, but he don't have a high school diploma, and because of some new rules the Board of Education put in, he has to get his high school diploma or he has to lose his job. So he basically goes back to school there at the school, and inside of lockers, these people working on this, these scientists working on this experimental thing to make people smarter. So they experiment on Ernest, and he becomes smarter. But as he does, he becomes a jerk, and people don't. Everybody loved Ernest before. He was the janitor all the kids joked around with. But then he starts becoming a jerk and acting better than everybody else. and of course he ends up coming back to his senses at the end. But of all the Ernest movies on my list, this is the one I've seen the least, but I've still seen it over a dozen times. Number 26, our second Hogan movie on the list, 1991 Suburban Commando. The one I'm the most familiar with. This movie was crazy. He's like this bounty hunter in space, and he's just going after these people and trying to destroy them. For obviously for good, because bounty obviously it's usually for good. In this case, he is a good bounty hunter. Well, not that good. He didn't kill the person he was after. Anyway, he destroys a bunch of stuff, and his boss tells him he needs a break, so he has to go to Earth to recharge. But he has to do it in such a over a long period of time at a low frequency, so that way the people he was after that are now after him don't find him. So anyway, he goes and finds this house for rent, this family, and end up staying in their house and becoming friends with them. Another Christopher Lloyd movie. Christopher Lloyd is the dad in this, and he ends up following him one night. I think his name was Shep in this, or was it in Mr. Nanny? I think it was Shep in this one, Hogan's character. But he follows him and finds all his space stuff and puts it on and doesn't realize it, but he's alerting the bounty hunters, the other bounty hunters, and they end up coming near the end, and they're played by two wrestlers, Brutus Beefcake and The Undertaker. Before he was The Undertaker, this was right after he left WCW, when he was Mean Mark Callis, real name Mark Calloway, but right before he got hired on as The Undertaker. However, the movie came out. It was filmed before he was hired by the WWF, but it came out after he'd been established as The Undertaker. He ends up coming up through the toilet. So there's The Undertaker standing there with a toilet seat around his head. And then he talks, and when they talk, their voices sound like babies. It's hilarious. This movie was crazy. Number 25, 1992, Beethoven. I know there's been a ton of sequels, but the only one I really liked is the original one. The Steve Martin, his dad doesn't want the dog, and the family loves the big dog, but there's evil vet tries to steal kidnap the dog for this deadly experiment, and the dad has to help save Beethoven at the end. Classic movie there. Number 24, Ernest Goes to Camp from 1987, the original full-length Ernest movie. After he did, the commercials and did his TV series, or I don't know if it's TV series, but his TV special, I should say. I don't think his series had come out yet. But the very first full-length actual theater movie, Ernest Goes to Camp, where he plays this camp counselor, all these, rowdy, juvenile, delinquent kids, and, some of them make fun of him, but he ends up, helping to save the camp and becoming friends with everybody. And then at number 23 is 1988's Ernest Saves Christmas. Obviously a staple around Christmas time, and kind of broke one of my rules with this of not including, I didn't want to include Christmas movies into this because, obviously Christmas movies and kids movies go hand in hand. And I didn't even think about it because it's an Ernest movie, but yeah, I included it, so I broke my own rule. But anyway, the classic story about, Ernest finding the real Santa Claus, and Ernest in this one's a cab driver. He's just all his crazy Ernest hijinks, and there's runaway girl that's just wants somebody to love her basically. She's a kid and she don't really have a family, and Ernest basically becomes like her family, and and the other thing is Santa Claus is getting old and needing to retire and wanting to get the next Santa Claus, which was this the kids TV host, but he got fired from his job, because they were moving on to some other type of programming. So he wants to join this movie about Santa Claus, but it's called Santa's Slay, but it's slay as in kill somebody. So he's like, I wouldn't cuss like this, and then Santa shows up to the thing, and he literally punches somebody for suggesting that Santa would say something so derogatory. It's a hilarious movie. Number 22 is 1997's Flubber. I do believe this is Disney, and it's Robin Williams. This is a crazy movie where he invents this rubber substance that bounces everywhere and transforms things. Another one that's based on one that I think came out in the 60s. Number 21, speaking of Robin Williams, 1995's Jumanji. I don't care for any of the sequels that came out with The Rock and all that blah 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 crap, but the original Jumanji movie was so good. About the board game where, once you started playing, you were playing, and whatever happened on the board, real things came into life. Like, this is a classic movie that we watched over and over again. I actually recently found the board game that came out from this, and it was very underwhelming. Me and my wife played it once and probably won't play it again. It's just a lot of just rolling around and the board and nothing really happening. They could have had, like, incorporate more stuff from the movie. But I wish they would have came out with like these days, like an actual video game version of like the movie where you have real life consequences and you gotta navigate the consequences and try not to die and get back to playing the game. But anyway, Jumanji is such a great movie. Pizza. Coming in at number 20 now, 1984's Gremlins. I like Gremlins too. I just didn't put it on the list over some of the other stuff. But I mean, the original Gremlins was great. And I know people argue that's a Christmas movie because it's set around Christmas time. But I really think of it more as just something else. Whenever I think of Gremlins, Christmas doesn't come to mind. I think of Gizmo, obviously, and the crazy Gremlins. And of course, the second one, it went even crazier. But I think the first one had the best story to it. About the rules for Gizmo. You don't feed him after midnight. Don't get him wet, and all these crazy evil gremlins pop up, and they just go nuts. I think Stripe was the leader of the bad gremlins, and Gizmo's like the cutest thing ever. And Furbies from the 90's completely ripped the gremlins off. I don't know if they ever got sued, but they probably should have. But coming in at number 19 is 1991, The Addams Family, the original of the 90's Addams Family movies. And by the way, that makes me think of the Batman movies from the 90's, which I didn't include in this because they're not specifically made for kids. They're more of a darker adventure type thing. And I was like, well, should I? I ended up not putting them on the list because I wanted to keep this more lighthearted, kids stuff. It could easily fit in, but I just decided not to, so that was my reasoning. But anyway, the Addams Family is, the crazy one. Another Christopher. Forgot how many kids movies he was in and different roles. Like, he played an angel in one, the other one he's playing a suburban dad, and this one he's playing Uncle Fester. But yeah, it's Uncle Fester basically loses his memory, and you don't know in the story as it's going on because he's just this guy that's like hired by these people that are trying to get the Addams Family house and their fortune, but he's hired to say he's their long lost brother Uncle Fester, and he was lost in the Bermuda Triangle. By the end, he gets his memory back, and he ends up finding out he actually is Uncle Fester and not this woman mom, or not this woman's son that was lying and getting him to try to lie to say he was Uncle Fester. He actually is Uncle Fester. But coming in at number 18 is 1997, Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. The second of the Power Rangers movies. This is a good one. I didn't like it as much as the original, which is coming later, of course. But it has the kid as the Blue Ranger, and it's where they have the cars, and instead of the cars that turn into Zords. But it was kind of a cool thing to see, where they have incorporate like vehicles into it now, where they get to ride around in cars. And the bad guy per se in this is Divatox, with the underwater thing. And it's also a pretty cool moment in the movie where the original Pink and Red Ranger, Jason and Kimberly, are in the movie briefly near the end. It was a pretty cool thing. Because by then the Pink Ranger is Catherine, who was originally an evil cat / human person, that Rita brought along but became good. And then the Red Ranger by that time was Tommy, who was of course in love with Kimberly, and I think he was like with Catherine in the show at this point, or not maybe with her, but it was implied. It was, even with Kimberly, it was always implied. I mean, they kissed a few times, but it was like, they didn't spend too much time on the relationship unless the episode called for it. But number 17 is Three Ninjas Kick Back from 1994. And there's a lot of continuity errors in this series, and it's because of like distribution issues or something. But anyway, in this one, the boys travel with their grandpa to Japan to deliver a dagger. Now this movie officially came out and is listed. We get it, Turtles. You're coming. This movie is officially listed as the sequel to the original Three Ninjas, but it was actually should be third in the series because, for one, they're older than they are in the actual third movie somehow, but also the only actor that returned as for the kids was the actor who played Colt, because Rocky and Tum Tum are the other kid characters in this. But they left, and they had two kids take their place. But as a kid, I never even noticed that somehow. I don't know why. But like I said, this was supposed to come out. Well, it wasn't supposed to come out third. I'll talk about it a little bit later. What was supposed to come second. But this one ended up being the second movie. Which, if you're watching and like trying to watch in order and make sense of it, it should come third, even though it come out second. Number 16 is 1989's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Rick Moranis. I did it again. I said in my head, I was like, I'm going to say his name right. And I say Moranis. I'm an ignoramus. No, but this is a classic one, where he's like a scientist. He ends up shrinking the kids. It's basically the plot of it. And he has to try to get them back to normal size. And of course, there's sequels like Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. But yeah, the original was the best. Number 15, we're halfway through the list, is 1993's Dennis the Menace. I love this movie. The kid playing Dennis was great at it. Just such a little brat. And always messing with the Wilsons, especially George. Of course, Martha Wilson never had a problem with him, but George did. But in this one, Christopher Lloyd, and another one. This one, he plays a homeless bum. With all messed up teeth and everything. And he steals George's gold coin collection, and Dennis follows him. And of course, Dennis is basically clueless. He just thinks it's this nice little homeless guy. He's going to try to help him. Really, he ends up thwarting his plans. Make him eating his chili and farting, and it's just such a crazy movie. I love Dennis the Menace, whether it's the old 60s series or the 80s cartoon, but this movie is so good. Number 14. I do believe this was made for kids. It was also made for adults too, but I listed it anyway. It's 1990's Kindergarten Cop, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. So many classic lines from this movie, but basically, he's a cop, and he's trying to find this there's this criminal on the loose, and his ex-wife and son are in this town, and he knows he's going to go there to see them, so he's going undercover. His partner, he's got a female partner. I can't remember if she was pregnant or sick or something in this movie. But anyway, she was supposed to be like the stand-in teacher, because I think she had like previous experience teaching, but she couldn't do it, so Arnold Schwarzenegger's character has to. And he'd never done anything with, he doesn't like kids at all, so him trying to be a teacher is hilarious. But that is such a great movie, and one line in particular I won't say in here because again it's made for kids, but boys that's all I'll say. You probably know the rest. Coming in number 13 is Three Ninjas Knuckle Up from 1995. It was like I was trying to talk about earlier. It was released third in the series, but is actually a sequel. And the plot of it is the kids try to protect like this Native American village from like a toxic waste company or something. But it has the original kids in it. So if you're watching this in order they come out, you'll watch the first one, then the second one, two different kids, and then you watch the third one, and it's the three original kids again, but they're somehow younger than they were in the other one. So like it's a weird distribution errors that made this come out at different times. It's hard to, so if you're watching it, you really want to watch in the order of first, third, and second, really. They were creating prequels and stuff before that even became a genre. But anyway, number 12, 1992, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. The sequel to the classic. This time Kevin's not left home alone. He just gets separated from his parents at the airport. He ends up going to New York City while his parents are in Florida. And then it just so happens that the wet bandits from the first movie broke out of prison and just so happened to be in New York. when the original was in Chicago. It's like, of all places, New York, and that big of a city, and they end up finding him. Because it's a movie, of course. But that leads me to number 11, 1990's Home Alone. And, I could have had this higher on the list because it's such an all-time classic, but this is just where I had it landing. The classic, Kevin gets left home alone accidentally, and the wet bandits come around, and he has to protect his house, and, all the lengths he goes to, and especially that final ending where all the booby traps, and just such classic. Anything after Home Alone 2 is garbage, but you can't go wrong with those two. And of course, I guess I broke my rule with Christmas movies there too, but I didn't put specific ones on this, like, my favorite all-time Christmas movie, Mickey's Christmas Carol, or Rudolph, or Frosty. I know those came out before. I know Rudolph was out before then. I think Frosty was before the 80s. If not, it was the 80s. Anyway, that don't matter because they're not on the list. I was giving you my reasoning why. But coming in at number 10, finally the Turtles can talk, because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 from 1993. And this is the one that gets crapped on a lot, but I still love this movie. It's where the Turtles end up, they get the scepter, and they end up, they're holding it while these people in ancient Japan are holding it, and they end up switching with these people, and they end up going back to ancient Japan, and they got to help, this kid out. It's such a great movie. I don't, people are like, oh, just because it's so different, the time traveling thing. But I mean, at this point, what are you going to do? You're going to have them fight Shredder for a third time? People would call that boring. You can't win. You can't please everybody. But this movie pleased me, so I love it. Coming in number 9, 1995's Major with Damon Wayans. This movie is hilarious. Damon Wayans plays this freaking military commander, and he's he's like going, basically like losing his mind, basically. And they're doing things differently in military and just really don't fit in, so they find something for him to do, and the something to do is he's gonna go to this military school to work on these kids, and he's treating them like adults. Calling them maggots and all this other stuff. Like, this movie is so freaking funny. Like, every time I watch it, there's new stuff in it that I didn't even get as a kid that I find even more funny now. But we're getting towards the end of the list now. We're coming in at number 8, 1991's Ernest Scared Stupid. Probably a lot of people, if they were to list their favorite Ernest movies, this would probably be the first one. It's a great movie. The freaking troll he calls Booger Lips, and the Worrell family curse, and in this one he plays like I think he's a garbage truck driver, and he has to fight these trolls off that are turn the kids into like wooden things. He turns his doggy Rimshot into a little wooden thing. But like I said, a lot of people list this as their favorite Ernest movie. It's my second favorite Ernest movie. It's so good though, whether you're watching at Halloween time or just any time. Coming in at number 7 is 1987's The Monster Squad. And I kind of struggle putting this here because this does have like adult themes, but in the end it is made for kids. And it's a classic 80s monster movie about all the classic monsters from like the 60s, basically. Frankenstein, Wolfman, the creature from the Black Lagoon, or they're called the Gill Man in this one. And they're all led by the most evil of them all, Dracula. They're trying to take over the world and unleash evil, and these kids have to stop it. And it's such a great movie. Werewolves have nards line gets me every time. Coming in at number 6 though is 1995's The Indian in the Cupboard. Actually seen this in theaters. We went as a field trip for school, and we read the book in class. The book, the whole series is so good. Like, The Indian in the Cupboard was like the first one, I believe, and then they came out with like a sequel and also like a prequel, like talking about how the whole the key was originally made and everything, and the main character's family has a connection to that. But it's a basic story where he finds this cupboard and a key, and whatever action figure he puts in there actually comes to life, but in little form. They're not like normal size. They're like, the size of the action figures. And he has an Indian and a cowboy, and of course, they don't historically get along, but by the end they become friends, and it's a really good movie. And like I said, if you've never read the stories for it, like, go out of your way to find the books for it. I can't remember how many there is, 5 or 6 or something like that. They're not that super long. They're kids' books, but they really paint a picture of the whole series. It was such a great series. I believe that I think some of the books were made after the movie came out, like, because they were wanting to, the author, obviously the books were becoming popular because it was a movie, but the author wanted to put more lore into it. But it ended up being a really great series of books. I've read the series like twice. I might read it again soon. But now we've reached the top 5. And number 5, we got the original 3 ninjas from 1992. Rocky, Colt, and Tum Tum. They learn to become ninjas from their ninja master grandpa. And they're later kidnapped by a criminal that their dad's after, because their dad's like an FBI agent. And the grandpa and dad have to save the kids. And then, and like I said, the kids become ninjas. And man, we were obsessed with these 3 ninjas movies as kids. Like I said, we never noticed that there was, oh, this didn't come out right, or that's not the same kid. We never noticed that as kids. I mean, I'm sure some did, but we were just, we were just watching the action because freaking. I mean, this came out right before Power Rangers, but probably by the time we seen it, Power Rangers had probably just come out. Coming in at number 4, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze from 1991. Literally just watched this movie yesterday. Great sequel. It has Vanilla Ice at the end with the ninja rap, but and basically this one, Shredder's not dead at the end of the first movie like everybody thought, and you end up finding out that the reason the Turtles and Splinter mutated because of this ooze from this company, and Shredder kidnaps the scientist from the company and takes the ooze and turns these 2 animals into like these giant mutated beasts. But he also did something, the professor did something to the formula, because he was kidnapped, to make them kind of like stupid, so that way they wouldn't be intelligent, because if they're intelligent and could destroy things, that could be the end of everything. But anyway, at the very end, Shredder ends up getting the ooze on him, becomes Super Shredder, played by Kevin Nash, famous wrestler, also known as Diesel. But, man, that's such a classic movie. Like I said, just watched it last night. Now we got our top 3. We got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie from 1995. This is so good. We love this movie so much as kids. Went and seen this one in theaters too, just to see it with our friends. I think our stepdad's friends actually took us to see this. But it's got Rita and Zed, of course. They're married, but this ancient evil being known as Ivan Ooze, as my wife calls him, Dr. Goo. He's unearthed, and he's like more evil, and puts like Rita and Zed in like the snow globe, and Goldar, the little minion of Rita and Zed, gladly goes to work for Ooze now. He'll work for anybody that'll give him an important spot. But anyway, basically Zordon's dying, so the Rangers have to go to another planet to get these ninja Zords, where the animals. And the famous scene with the Black Ranger's like, "I'm a frog," and the woman that's on the planet, she's like, "Yeah, the type you kiss to become a prince," and kissed him, and he's all like, "Oh," he's all happy. But anyway, they got these ninja Zords and come back and take care of Ooze. And in the actual series, like the TV series, they get their ninja Zords a different way, and they actually show that on there. But it's basically a way to continue the movie, or because the movie knew, because it's filmed. If you don't know anything about the Power Rangers, it's based on the Japanese series. That all the fighting scenes of the Power Rangers and stuff is all Japanese footage. The American footage is showing the Rangers like here, the actual people, and the scenes at the school and all that stuff. But in the movie, everything was shot new, so that's why the Power Ranger suits look all shiny, because everything's like new. The new, nothing's used from previous series. But when you get to the series and they talk about the Ninja Zords, they're using the footage from that. So it's like you're watching it, trying to make sense out of it. It's like, wait, I thought they got him from this. So like, it's Power Rangers. Don't worry too much about continuity in Power Rangers. Yeah, but this movie was so good. Now we've come to the end of the list here. Well, not the exact end. We still got 2 and 1, but I was struggling again, especially with this part of which one to put as number 1 and which was number 2, and I finally figured out what I was going to do. Number 2 is 1990's Ernest Goes to Jail. I've probably watched this movie more times than any other movie ever. This movie is so classic. It's got basically a doppelganger, of course, played by Jim Varney, but Mr. Nash Mr. Nash. The one guy always called him. But yeah, Ernest gets called randomly to jury duty for Mr. Nash's partner in crime in prison. You know, he's already in prison, but he's charged with killing somebody at prison. So they had to find some way to make the prisoner go back to court. But anyway, Ernest is randomly called for jury duty. The one scene where he's chewing on the pen and gets it all over his face, and he's trying to wipe it off with the paper, and ends up chewing on the paper. Ernest is nuts in this. But yeah, he ends up. They end up switching places. You know, they convinced him to go to the prison to see the conditions in which everything happened. So they end up taking the whole court, the jury, and everything to the prison. And as Ernest says, "Oh boy, a field trip." But yeah, they end up doing the old switcheroo, and then Mr. Nash becomes Ernest and realizes that because Ernest works at a bank, and of course he's a bank robber himself, so it's like this couldn't have worked out any better. But the whole thing is Mr. Nash is supposed to get electrocuted in the electric chair. But there's a whole subplot that's going on even before this. At the beginning, Ernest is working on this thing to wax the floor, and it's all messed up. He ends up getting electrocuted, and he don't die from it. He ends up everything magnetized ends up sticking to him. So at one point he's in a restaurant, and the metal thing comes off this lobster and sticks to his face. But anyway, that ends up being how he survives the electric chair and becoming super powerful. He can float through the air. And at the end we get the face off with Ernest and Mr. Nash, and Chuck and Bobby, the security guards, are hilarious. This movie is so great. And I was gonna put it as number 1, but I realized there was one that just edged it out. And if my ringtone would go off again, pizza, pizza, it would tell you the answer. Number 1 is 1990, also another 1990 movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And just like with the second one, I just watched this yesterday. This movie is so classic. This was the height of Turtle Mania. You had the cartoon that came out in '87, and it was super popular. This was also the year that the Turtles concert, where they had their live concert tour, was on, and Turtles I don't think were ever as popular as they were in 1990. They were everywhere. Toys, like I said, cartoons, and now the movie. The movie was so brilliant. They end up facing the Shredder, and they have the backstory of Splinter, being a pet rat of his master, and Shredder killing his master, and then Splinter is the reason the Shredder's face is all messed up because he bit his face, and then Shredder had cut his ear off, and then they get mutated, and the Turtles are hilarious, and it's such a great movie. Like I said, I couldn't tell whether I wanted to go with that or Ernest Goes to Jail, because that one had my heart from watching it so many times and just being reminding me of my dad and my mom so much. But in the end I had to go with the Turtles because it's so classic. I couldn't put anything above it. So but now I'm gonna do a top 5 overall of these, and it shouldn't be any surprises of what's near the top. It's not going to be anything that hasn't been on the list, obviously. But I'll go through them quickly. Number 5, Rookie of the Year. Number 4, The Fox and the Hound. Number 3, Hercules. Number 2, Ernest Goes to Jail. And, of course, number 1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I wasn't going to switch anything around there. Yeah, so my favorite kids movie of all time are the 80s and 90s, and probably any time period, really, is the original Turtles movie of 1990. But I thank you guys for joining me for this. This has been a really fun one. Next month I'm going to start kind of a new thing with the series. Next month's bonus episode is number 19. And it's going to be April 3rd. which is the first Friday of the month. There it is. It was late. But yeah, April 3rd will be my 19th bonus episode. And this is going to be my top 10 WrestleManias of all time. And what I'm going to do is not every month. It's going to try to make this every other month. And if it comes up to where, I believe October is supposed to be a month it's supposed to be done in, if I'm going every other month starting in April. But I'm going to skip that one. But, and it could be, every 3 months or something, just when I feel like doing it. But I'm going to take a pay-per-view and, or PLE as they're called now, Premium Live Events, from either the WWE/WWF or WCW, because they're the ones that had the longest history with those, I didn't see a ton of the TNA ones. ECW only had a few years on pay-per-view. I don't watch AEW at all. Yeah, you can watch them on ESPN because they freaking got rid of the network, which sucks. But anyway, besides all that, I'm gonna do where I take a specific one and go through them all, memories, watch them if I haven't seen them. And just give my top 10s of them. Now, some of them, maybe there's only 6 or 7 pay-per-views, like of a certain one, like what was the pay-per-view? Bad Blood or something. Maybe there's only 3 or 4 of those. So obviously it won't be a top 10. And if there's only one that's only had 1 or 2 pay-per-views, I may do a specific episode where I just list all those, the generic ones. And then the WWF In Your House, there was a bunch of those. I'll put that all in one series. But anyway, stuff like WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, there's been a ton of those. But anyway, next month, because next month is WrestleMania, I'm going to do my top 10 WrestleManias of all time. And just, I'll go a little in depth on them, just give the matches and some thoughts on them, not anything too crazy. Like I said, it's only a top 10, so I'm not going to be listing all of them in order, just my top 10. And I know now WrestleManias are 2 nights, but each night is going to be listed as its own thing, not combined into one, because it's kind of unfair. Back in the old days, you got one night for 3 hours. Nowadays, you get 2 nights at like 4 or 5 hours a piece, so, it wouldn't be fair to stack that up against a smaller one. So, you might see, I don't even know what the list is going to be yet, but you might see like the same year, just 2 different nights get 2 spots on the list. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if any of the recent ones will actually make the list until I actually go back and look at these things. But anyway, that's going to start that. It's just, if you're a wrestling fan, that's a pretty cool thing. If you're not, you can skip that. That's with these bonus episodes, some of them are about, like my last one was about Garth Brooks albums. A lot of people that don't like his music or like country music would probably skip that one. But maybe you like, kids movies from the 80s and 90s, so you watch this one, You can tell what it is in the title, whether you want to skip it or not. It don't offend me if you skip episodes, whatever you want to do, I'm not, I'm just making these videos. I make these videos for fun, to hopefully give my insights and memories and get people thinking, hey, maybe I can make a thing like this. I like this, and I had different opinions. If you got your own video series, go ahead and post it in the comments. I'll check it out. Because that's why I started this, from watching people do this. So anyway, sorry for the long-winded outro there and the intro with all my plugs for music and stuff. But anyway, this has been a fun one. Check out some of these movies on this list if you've never seen them before. Like if there's any movie on the list you haven't seen, like go out of your way to check it out. Put yourself back in the 80s and 90s. I know I said 80s and 90s, and most of these have probably been from the 90s. But, that's the time I remember most as a kid. That's why I do Tales from the 90s podcast. I was born in 83, so I have, 7 years in the 80s. But really, I was 6, just turned 7 by the time the 80s were over. So you don't have as many core memories as you do, your first 7 years of life as you do your next 10 years after that, from like 7 to 17. So that's why this whole thing is based on the 90s, because that's my core memories. But anyway, thank you guys for joining me, and we'll see you next time.